Hello and welcome back, everybody, to another edition here in the ongoing deep dive series into the 13 moon calendars. And here today we're going to be looking at the third Celtic Tree Moon in the Celtic 13 moon calendar of trees. I'm joined, as always, by the wonderful and redoubtable Francis Kavanagh on this wonderfully beautiful St. Patrick's Day. How are you, Francis?
I'm very good, thank you, David. Very happy to be here. The ash is an amazingly powerful, big tree to talk about.
It
So it'll be
is.
good. Yes,
It is.
yes.
So these videos for this particular part of the 13 moon journey that we are doing in a much broader scope across various platforms, but with the QPW tribe and many of you watching here on YouTube and in other places. We've been looking at it for a number of different filters, but here we're looking at the more seasonal calendar that our ancestors, the Celtic people, used really to manage how to live in nature. Now, of course, my partner, Bella, works very much with the High Mayan Universal Time Code lineage, which also works with 13 moons, but starts on July the 26th. That could be due to the climatic conditions. It's a much more Mesoamerican calendar for a much more equator or tropical based countries. Now, in the Northern Hemisphere, particularly in the Blessed Isles of Britain, but all across North America and North Europe, this is the time of year when spring is bursting forth. And here we are at the third moon in this system. We started with the birch and then we went to the rowan, which is a mountain ash. The third moon, which is concluding today, is the last day. It's very interesting, Francis. We were just talking before we hit record that this particular tree moon, the ash, started on Ash Wednesday and finishes today on St. Patrick's Day, which is sort of very much linked to much of what this day is about and the energy that we're in. Today feels very much like a day for the fairies. And of course, St. Patrick. Well, he had to deal with the fairies in Ireland, but I'm getting onto a different topic. But we're concentrating today on the ash. And the ash is, as you just said, Francis, a very, very powerful tree, which we in our tribe especially know mostly from the immersion we did, the wisdom of the three trees, working with the oak, the yew, and the ash. But most of all, working with the blueprint of what is more commonly known as the world tree. And within that system of world trees, there is a very famous blueprint for a world tree toroidal field system, which is Yggdrasil, which in the Norse traditions is the ash tree. So we'll be having a look at that side of the mythology a bit later on. But as usual, we're also going to be looking at the distribution of the tree, the different species, the medicines, the magic, a bit about the mythology, and anything else that myself and my skywalking sister Francis here pulled from the ethers somewhere due to our own interactions and experiences with the ash. So before we get into the slides, Francis, is there anything you'd like to share up front that's in your awareness about the ash to kick things off?
I don't think so. I think it'd be good just to get into it. And then, I mean, I have a couple of stories and stuff like that, but no, go ahead.
Alrighty, so without further ado, let's get the presentation up. And as always, we'll use the slides for prompts into this presentation. So here we are now into the third moon of the Celtic tree calendar. Again, here are just the images so we can see a little easier. We started with the birch, which starts, of course, on Christmas Eve, then to the rowan, the mountain ash, and here we are now on the 17th of March that we're recording St. Patrick's Day on the last day of the ash moon. Tomorrow, we will be moving into the fourth moon in the Celtic tree system, which is the alder. So happy alder moon, everybody, for tomorrow. The alder is kind of a mysterious tree. So if any of you out there know anything about the alder, definitely start connecting with it now in preparation for the month ahead. But for now, we're going to be concentrating on the beautiful magical ash, which runs from the 18th of February to today, March the 17th. So let's start by having a look at just a few different types of ashes here. I like to put a few pictures of some different varieties. We have, so the ash is known in Latin as Fraxinus, and the Fraxinus genus. And here we have in the middle, Fraxinus excelsior, the European ash tree that is found across most of Northern Europe. On the right is the black ash, otherwise known as Fraxinus nigra. And then on the left is Fraxinus caroleana. So both those left and right are from the Americas. And if we, I'll come to the maps in a minute, but In general, there are 45 to 65 different types of Fraxinus, depending on which sort of subgenres you include or don't include. Most of them are deciduous, meaning they drop their leaves in autumn, although some are subtropical species which stay evergreen. Interesting. It's a bit like some of the oaks that are evergreen. You tend to think of them being deciduous, but not all. Certainly here in the Americas, there are some oaks that don't drop their leaves. So yeah, we can't always be so hard and fast with these things. The genus is widespread throughout much of Europe, Asia, and North America, as we'll see in a minute. The seeds, known as keys, are botanically fruits of the type called Samara. Some species are dioecious, having male and female flowers on separate plants, which I think was also true of maybe the mountain ash and the birch, if I remember correctly. Um,
Mm.
so in Europe, the most common is the European ash, as we just said, the Fraxinus excelsior. And in North America, we have the black ash, the Fraxinus nigra, the green ash, the Fraxinus pennsylvanica, and the white ash, Fraxinus americana. So black, green, and white ashes are the main ones here in the Americas. We can see here the habitat of the European ash, so pretty much covers all of Europe, and somehow has escaped probably through through a few diaspora people heading down to New Zealand and South America, probably Irish and Celtic ancestors, I would imagine, were responsible for that bit of spreading. And then here in the Americas, we can see this is really all the same area. This is all the eastern side of the US and Canada. This also, if you look, you can see it's the same piece of coast. So the black ash, the white ash, and the green ash predominantly come from this part of the Americas, the northeast corner. There are, in fact, many other ash species from Asia and other places too, but these are the ones that probably most of us watching this will have come across. How many ashes do you know of, Francis? Have you come across any of these ones, the black, white, or green, or do you mostly just know the European one?
Just the European one, really. I don't remember the ash in Canada. Mind you, I was in the West most of the time, so maybe it's not there. I don't know. Um, but no, the only one I'm familiar with, really familiar with, is the European one.
Right, and this question has just got me thinking because we, of course, lived under the branches of an ash tree for 6 months when we were first here. And when I looked up, it wasn't a European ash, actually. I think it was a Virginia ash. So I need to go back and check that. But essentially, what I realized is it wasn't the European ash because it's not so prevalent here, but in perhaps a bit the same way we can say with the oak tree or some of the other big denizens of the forest, that even though the species might be a little different, the overarching oversoul blueprints that the tree species carries, I think, can be accessed through any of the family in general. We know this, Francis, from the Artemisias. Of course, they all remove parasites to some extent. They're all very good
Mm.
on psychic
Mm.
stuff, but the parasites that maybe Artemisia douglasiana can remove from the environment it grows on the west coast of America to maybe Artemisia yamogi or princeps, which are used in moxa in the Asian countries, might be a little different. So we can understand that perhaps within species there are specialists according to the certain area that they grow in. Perhaps in the case of the trees. They've adapted to certain environments to work with the mycorrhizal and the other tree roots in the area to manage the ecosystem. Any thoughts
Well,
there, Francis?
yeah, what I find with trees is if you can't find the tree that you want to connect with,
Hmm.
I mean, this is what's happened in my life. If I can't find the tree, I go to a tree that looks most like it and connect through that tree, and that seems to work really well. So there's this. I mean, obviously, there's no separation,
Right.
in truth, and I found that to be a brilliant um, avenue to connect with anything that you want, especially with the trees.
Right, so it's basically using the wood wide web. So you can't find the
The
tree
World
that you
Wide
want to make a
Web.
call to. Yeah, so you pick up
Yes.
the receiver underneath a different tree and you put the call through. Yeah, can I speak to the white hash, please, that I can't find right? Just 1 second, sir. We'll just connect you to the Americas. Oh, we've got one online willing to speak with you. Well, if you think about it, like with all of the tree roots and the mycorrhizal all connecting with each other literally underneath the ground, it's not such an outlandish idea, really, is it? To
No.
be able to connect to another tree through the tree roots and through the wood wide web.
Well, yes, exactly. And I think the spirit of the forest, where there will be all kinds of trees in some forests,
Mm.
they all know each other. And uh, and I just do these things, I mean,
Yeah.
if I get if I want to connect with something and I'm slightly frustrated because it's not around, um, that's what I decided to do, and it worked so well. So it feels like that's perfectly possible, um,
Well, at the
because it
quantum
was
level, it
possible
makes
for
perfect
me.
sense. Yeah. If you have
Mm.
the telephone number of a tree, let's just call it a telephone number, the anchor point, the quantum point that you can connect with, then yeah, you can obviously go to another tree and do that. But as you know, Francis, and as our tribe has got good at, we can basically do that anywhere and anytime as long as we
Mm.
got the telephone number. Now, getting the telephone number of a tree is not like getting the telephone number of a human. You kind of have to spend quite a bit of time with the tree before it gives you that quantum. Well, at least in the old days, this was the case. I'm finding it a lot easier these days to pick up very quick communications from trees and plants that I don't know very well just by sitting with them for half an hour and with intention saying, oh, I want to be in the space of this beautiful plant spirit. I don't have anything in mind. I'm just open for a connection and a communication. Most of the time, something comes through pretty quickly, and very occasionally it doesn't, in which case it's just a gentle sort of emptiness meditation. So, yeah, at a
Mm.
quantum level, Francis, once you have the vibrational connection, the telephone number, you should be
Yeah.
able to pick up that hotline to any tree, any plant that you know at any point from anywhere, right?
Well, absolutely, because really you're connecting with the energy. If you know
Yes,
the energy, you
the
will
frequency.
recognize if you're connecting with the tree that you want.
Yeah,
And the other trees don't seem to mind at all if I if I'm going through them. Um, uh, and I think that I think we carry frequencies that particularly resonate with certain trees and plants. So
mm,
we get to know their energy very well once we've interacted with them,
yes,
because we've been drawn to them so strongly in the first place because they're going to resonate with us. Um, and so there's just this lovely um, um, well, it feels like just a big community, really,
right.
to me,
Yeah.
plants and trees. And it's nature, isn't it? We are nature. So um, uh, there's absolutely no reason why we can't connect
Right. And
anywhere,
with
everywhere.
that in mind, I'm just going to give a quick plug for Dristan's Tales from a New Earth Greenhouse, which starts tomorrow on the
Mm.
18th of March. And if you want to know how to communicate with trees and plants, we're going to be starting tomorrow with the Fairy Gateway plant, which is Primrose. In fact, the Primula family in general, because we're also going to be looking at some of the other versions, and also Cowslip. So Primula vulgaris and Primula veris are on the menu for tomorrow, midday Central Time. And before that, at 11 o'clock, there is a free to join for 45 minutes Quantum Plant Alchemy live call before we switch over to the talk about primroses. So if you want to learn more about how to connect to the fairies and open those gateways, all of which is very important actually in this context of St. Patrick's Day
Mm.
and talking here about Yggdrasil, the ash tree, we are in a moment when the fairy beings, we are all carriers of fairy energy in some way, want to come forth. Why? Because underneath all of the other layers of our DNA and off-planet stuff and blah, 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 at the bottom of all of that, the creational energy that drives all humans is from the fairy kingdoms. Myself and Leslie have talked about this a lot, Francis, as you all know, many people
Mm.
here on the Cosmic History Code shows, and the alignment of Göbekli Tepe to Denin Badish, which in the Stellar Nations pathway is the home of the tree shepherds and the fairies, and of course the lords of the forest. So I like the idea of Göbekli Tepe aligning itself in a very positive way to those energies, and perhaps that's even part of today with St. Patrick. The energies have got pulled and misaligned and misconstrued and overlaid, and in the end, 1,500 years on since the death of that saint, we're not really any clearer as to who he was working for, what his agenda was, but we can perhaps begin to understand some of the situation at that time, post the era of Yeshua, but still in a very pagan Britain, still very much under the auspices of the Druids, who loved this tree, of course. The oak, the ash, and the thorn were the three main trees, as we'll see in a minute, of the Druid beings, but the Druids themselves were a solar order, so they were working with the golden rays of the sun. This is sometimes not quite understood. The Druids very much protectors of the green ray of the goddess, of the fairies, but also actually themselves coming on the solar golden rays of the yang masculine exterior consciousness. So today, really, St. Patrick's Day is a celebration of what I would suggest is the fusion of the green and the gold energy, the gold of the sun and the green of the goddess and nature, somehow wrapped up in this much maligned, reviled or revered. That is the big question about St. Patrick, actually. But all of this is very much in the context of looking at trees today, particularly the ash. And we're going to get to see why in a minute. But let's roll on, Francis, and see what's next. So this is the third moon of the Celtic tree system, as we've already said. And in the Old Norse Eddas, Yggdrasil, the world tree, was an ash. The spear of Odin was made from the branch of this tree, which we'll look at again in a bit. And this tree, which is also known by the Celtic Ogham alphabet name of Neon, or Neon. This is one of three trees sacred to the Druids. I just said the ash, the oak, and the thorn. And with this month, well, obviously we're at the end of this month, but I imagine many people might have been doing this anyway over the last month. It is a good month to do magic that focuses on the inner self. So we've been doing a lot of that in our tribe over the last, not just 1 month, but the last 4 years. And I can say that I think many of us are feeling very, very different, right, Francis? Since if we think back to 4 years ago, and what would that be, 2022, when we started out on this path with quantum plant healing. And well, our journey has taken us all over the place through the world of the plants, into the world of universal time, into our galactic DNA, into our internal quantum technology, working with four directions and elementals and fairies and everything else in between. And at the end of all of it, wow, here we are at the great moment of the ascension, which we also covered in the Quantum Guide to Navigation Guide to Quantum Consciousness. Yeah, plants make you productive. That's what I would say. When the fairies get into you, they've always got something more that they'd like you to do in the role of being creative. So anyway, we'll come to some of those things a bit later. But this is interesting, Francis. I did send this one to you with some thoughts associated with ocean rituals, magic, potency, prophetic dreams, and spiritual journeys. The ash can be used for making magical and mundane tools. These are said to be more productive than tools made from other wood. And if you place ash berries in a cradle, it protects the child from being taken away as a changeling by mischievous fae. Now,
Mm.
we could do a whole hour-long video on that sentence alone, based on some of the things that we've been finding out about the world that we live in over the last month. Far too much to share here, but needless to say, as many of you have reflected back to me in recent messages from our tribe, and I've been feeling the same, this situation that we are in on the planet is really an organic versus an inorganic war that has been raging on this planet for a very, very long time. And the Fae are on one side of that war, and on the other side, well, things that are inorganic. Let's just leave it there. So there are many things to say about that particular phrase, because you come across this a lot, Francis, in the old books, that from the Middle Ages, particularly around the 16th, 17th century, in most grimoires and witches' almanacs and stuff to do with mythology, you will always find this comment coming about fairies wanting to take human babies for changelings. Now, without going too much into a rabbit hole, it's funny how so many of these things are also in the viewfinder right now, with many things that are going on to do with, well, all the things we know in those files and cloning, and are the people on the TV even the same people they were 30 years ago? All of those things. So far too much to get into right here, but it is interesting, Francis, to receive these messages from the ancestors that also seem to speak of us to us of something that is going on in our world, or has been going on in our world until very recently, right?
Well, that's right. Yes, it seems like we travel into the past to heal things, heal these terrible situations. and we've hit that because everything's happened before so many times, and we messed up so many times, the rise and fall of civilizations and all that kind of thing. And it feels to me like we've gone in back into the past to heal all these collective traumas, huge traumas, and we're at a particularly potent point now, that I don't think we've ever been at before,
Right.
where we're maybe with all the work that we're doing, with nature, being nature, with the plants and the trees, it's all so totally organic that we're getting it right this time.
Hope so. I mean, look, if we can perhaps place our faith and trust in anything that our eyes show us, the one thing that I'm most likely to place my faith and trust into is a tree or a plant,
Yes.
because I've never had any bad experiences from them, which is not something I can say pretty much everything else that I've experienced in my life. And you know, we're at a point, Francis, as we all know, and I think probably most of our audience who watch these shows on our platform know that we're a little bit out there in how we view things, but anyone who's been paying attention will probably have come to the same conclusions that we've all come to, which this reality is not really what it looks like. And we're not sure in this moment how the reality is being generated, but we're pretty sure that if we could choose a reality, it wouldn't have looked like this for the last 50 years or
Mm.
longer. So that begs many questions. It's like, well, if we, the humans, wouldn't have chosen this reality, then why did we, the humans, choose this reality, if indeed that's true? So there are many questions, Francis, deep existential questions, esoteric questions that are very much in the collective space right now, literally in real time. If I check the Gogglebox narratives, which I do for 10 minutes most days, I can see very quickly that there is a large conversation now happening about who's human in all of this and what might be running things if it's not human. So
Mm.
we're going to keep it
Mm.
organic and natural today. So we'll leave all of those more rabbit hole kinds of conversations, maybe for another video, another time. But let's get into the mythology of the ash. And so here we see actually on the right is Odin's spear, Gungnir. And of course, in Norse lore, Odin hung himself from Yggdrasil, the world tree, for 9 days and nights so that he may be granted the wisdom. Yggdrasil was, of course, an ash, and since the time of Odin's ordeal, the ash has been associated with divination and knowledge. It is eternally green. You can see why the Druids liked it, and lives in the middle of Asgard, which in the Norse tradition is the upper world of the gods, Midgard being the middle world, and of course Helheim being the lower world. In pretty much all shamanic traditions, particularly when you see it laid out on the world tree, upper world is the world of the gods and beyond, the middle world is the world of humans, and also certain nature spirits. Not all nature spirits necessarily come from higher or lower places, they exist in the world with us, and then of course what was the lower world would be the world of the inner earth, the dwarves and the gnomes. Unfortunately, it got hijacked at some point, and the lower world was turned into the underworld, with all of the things that have happened there. So, very, very interesting that the ash gives us the model of our reality, which we're going to come into more detail later. So, yes, we can see the spear of Odin, Gungnir, was made from an ash tree. And in some Celtic legends, it is also seen as a tree sacred to the god Luv, who is celebrated at Lunasa. Lu and his warriors carried spears made of ash in some folk tales. From Greek mythology, there is the tale of the Malai nymphs that were associated with Uranus and said to make their homes in the ash tree. I'm not sure whether we'd like to meet these nymphs or whether we should be worried if we did, but apparently they live in ash trees, so maybe just keep that one in mind. Um, because of its close association not only with the divine but with knowledge, the ash can be worked for any number of spells, rituals, and other workings. That to me feels more like in the Wiccan way of doing things. I like to work with the ash as the great embodiment, feminine embodiment of the world tree that she is. I think that that's more than enough magic in one tree to keep you
Mm.
occupied for a while. Um, We've already said that the ash appears as neon in the Celtic Ogham alphabet, of course, a system which can also be used for divination. And as we've already mentioned too, ash is one of the three trees which were sacred to the Druids, the oak and the thorn being the others, and connects the inner self to the outer worlds. This is a symbol of connections, and I seem to have lost the last word there, and spiritual communication. So Very interesting, Francis. We're at a time where we've been talking a lot about bringing the heaven to earth, the as above, so below, but we sort of progressed the conversation beyond that in the last number of months to bringing the as within to the so without, the inner self to the outer world. And what we've been realizing through the sacred book and nature's gift that by allowing ourselves to enter into the inner world in which our true selves exist, we can, through connecting to our true selves, through our DNA and all of the other things that we've been doing, actually start to bring from the inside to the exterior into the manifest world our true selves.
Mhm.
Which is a very profound experience. And so, in the sacred book, we've all been learning how to channel our true avatar selves, which is both profound, slightly challenging, and for the first few times you do it, but even in the first, now 10 chapters that we've done, Francis, it's becoming
Mhm.
more easy and natural, certainly for me, but for all of us taking part in this process to be able to channel parts of us that maybe we've been afraid to show to the world before, or maybe that we didn't even know existed. So, again, in this profound moment that we're in, where we're really trying to bring the internal world that we actually exist in, the quantum world of the interior of the universe, to our manifest exterior world as we see it through our visual optical receivers, our eyes, is the ash tree in this moment.
Mhm. Mhm.
And when we think about Yggdrasil and the world tree, what we're really doing is bringing what's inside of us, the world of the four directions, of the inner elements, of the central column, even the place where the fairies gather in our internal technology around our creational fire in our etheric womb space. We've all been hiding those for so long because, it's been dangerous to show your creative energies to the world because somebody will probably try to come and make money out of them for you, apparently. Whereas now, we're at a place where perhaps the Fae in particular, the creative Fae, is like, well, in our world, nobody gets paid for doing anything because nobody does a job that they don't want to do. So, and nobody needs to get paid for something they really want to do. So we don't really understand all of that. Thanks. So, but if you think about it, it's logical. There doesn't need to be any of that in our world. It's another overlay
Yeah.
that the Matrix gave us. It's like, oh, we need you to do our dream for us, and we're going to dangle a big carrot called money, which we've just invented and which you never needed before we invented it. But now that we need you to do something for us, we've invented a mechanism which we'll pay you for to do that for us. Hence the 1260 Gregorian calendar, another big
Mm.
thing that we've talked about in our world. So I do think, Francis, in many ways, that the ash is reminding us on this last day of its moon to remember what its big mission was, which is to do with Yggdrasil and the Earth grid, but also to empower and inspire us to bring what is truly within us, the true self, the divine self,
Mm.
into an external display in many ways to show ourselves to the world. But what do you think?
Absolutely, because I mean the ash tree, well, it takes us far and wide, but it also takes us very, very deep.
Mm,
And it's known, I think, for it brings everything into truth and balance. I think that's its really divine.
balance.
Um, does a tree have a mission? I think that's its that's what its energy is. It's always bringing things to balance. Um, and and because it's been known uh, as a feminine tree and a more masculine tree because of the association with water on the one side, which is of
Yeah.
course is very feminine, and then there I believe there's an association with Mars because of the
Mm,
spears and the arrows and
right.
the weaponry that's been made.
Mm.
Um, and this has just come into my mind. This little point, which I'm not sure that it's pertinent right now, but it's in my head, so I'll say
Go
it.
for it.
Um, that because we were talking about the Druids
Mm,
and the best time to make a wand from ash is in to cut the wood at midsummer.
mm,
And when they did this, the Druids also collected fern seeds because apparently fern seeds would give them invisibility when they were working in the etheric worlds or the astral world. So I thought that was fascinating. I mean, the Druids did lots of magic with the ash. Um,
Yes. I'm not going
uh,
to ask how an innocent, sweet old lady like you knows all these kinds of magics, Francis. Or, yes, some
well,
things are best.
fairies disguise themselves,
I
you know.
know. But you know what? I didn't know that. That's fascinating. I've never really looked into ferns. I know that there's the guy that does astrology. He's into the ferns. I think he's from Hawaii or somewhere like that, and
Yes,
talks a lot
yeah.
about them. They're very, very old beings. But I've never looked at them too much. But we are going to come to the tools of the ash. So you're absolutely on
Mm.
point. Yes, and I think Culpeper, Nicholas Culpeper, linked the ash to Mars. But let's have a quick look at the etymology of the name. Compared to some tree names, this one's actually relatively straightforward. So the tree's common name, the ash, derives from the Old English ask, from the Proto-Indo-European name for the tree, while the name of the genus originated in Latin, fraxinus, from a Proto-Indo-European word for the birch. So you can see that there's a lot of confusion around the ash. Even we had it in the last moon with the rowan being a mountain ash that isn't a fraxinus at all. And so you do get this quite a bit. I think this is mostly down probably to erroneous identifications by the ancestors in the old days, perhaps seeing a tree that looked like one that they knew already and just misidentifying it. You come across those stories quite a bit, particularly from people coming to. So, for example, the conquistadors, when they arrived in the Americas, they named trees based on trees that looked similar to the ones that they knew back home. And some of them were the same, some of them were the same family, and some were completely different. And we've covered the Yopon holly, of course, in the sacred book, Ilex vomitoria, which is a very disturbing name. Mainly because the Spanish had seen Carranco Indians drinking it and then purging afterwards, and so they thought the plant made them sick, which is not exactly true. The Yopon is a revered plant. It's in the holly family, but it's also very much like yerba mate and guayusa. It makes a very nice, moderately caffeinated drink, but with the added benefit of theobromines, which of course cacao has a lot of. So good for the stimulation and good for the heart. But we're not here to talk about Yopon Holly right now, but it goes to illustrate how names and misidentifications can muddy the waters a bit. And here, both words also mean spear. So, kind of what you were just alluding to. Oops, something's
Mm.
just blown off my desk with that one. Because the ashwood was used for the shafts. And here on the right, we can see the Ogham glyph or rune for neon. And here we've got, I came across this interesting website when looking up the names of the ash tree in the Celtic languages, and this one very conveniently had all of them. So it's called Finchweg in Gaelic, and or I think it's on or variations of onsen or nishen in the various different Celtic languages, all of which you can see here. And in my own ancestors' native language of Kernowek, Cornish, it was simply called on. Both Odin and Thor, the god of thunder, possess magical spears made of ash wood. Mortal spear shafts were also typically made of ash, as were bows. In the absence of another world tree, also deeply connected to Yggdrasil, the yew tree, and also they used it to make arrow shafts. The words for ash and spear seem to be related in that a poetic Anglo-Saxon word for spear was aisk or ask, and the Norse word for ash was ask. These words influenced Highland place names such as Port Ascaig. So, if any of our Scottish brothers and sisters are watching this out there and have been to Port Ascaig or any with similar names, please do let us know if you had any wonderful ash experiences when you were there. And the Vikings were also referred to as the Eskling, meaning the men of the ash. Did you know some of those, Francis, or was that new for you?
That well, I knew that the I didn't know I knew about the Vikings because of the association with water and traveling um, and how the sailors would carry um, I don't know what you'd call them. Sometimes I think sometimes they made sort of little human type figures with the twigs or whatever, but carrying those kinds of things with them on their travels. But I didn't know most of what you just said.
I didn't know that one either. So kind of like puppets, maybe, but maybe more on the totem for the positive side.
Mm,
Um, wow,
yeah.
I didn't know that one. Well, let's see what else we've got here. So the way that the ash tree can be used is actually quite a lot. Of course, the ash has long been used by humans for a variety of applications, largely in part due to its elastic yet strong and close-grained wood. And I came across this beautiful picture here of an ash table that looks really beautiful. I think it's always nice. I never like to think of the trees being cut down in the first place, but managing an ecosystem does invariably mean having to remove something sometime. But if it's done in a positive way with intention, if you let the tree know that you just need to make space for the other beings in the area to benefit, then you can say to the tree, but you're going to live on as a table in my house so that we're always connected. So there are many different ways to make it okay with the tree, but most of all, you just need to talk to them. And of course, even if a tree is cut down in some cases, the tree roots will still continue to grow. Many an experiences I had of a seemingly dead tree still communicating with me through the tree roots that it connects to through its own tree roots. So again, the wood wide web. You can sit in a forest that is probably only 20 years old in terms of the oldest tree there, but you can tap into a forest that could be 2,000 years old
Mm.
or more underneath all of that because the roots will still be there. So yeah, that's something interesting to remember sometimes. Um, it has a beautiful brown grain with a thick, lighter sapwood, and even fallen ashes still make excellent choices for various kinds of woodworking. It's long been used for manufacturing various kinds of baskets. In fact, a good number of fruit boxes are made in part from ash. It is also used to make crates, flooring, furniture, and for various kinds of athletic equipment, baseball bats, sledges, canoe paddles, and snowshoes. Um, yeah. In in the very famous book Reverence for a Wood, I think by Eric Sloane, beautiful book if you've never come across it actually, notes that the ash bends with supreme strength, but since it splits with precision, splints for baskets, chairs, and hoops were made from the black variety. White ash is second in value to the oak, being the best material for tool handles, oars, and for any implement where elasticity and strength were required. So if you get a chance, do look up this wonderful book. It was written, I think, in the time of the pioneers, so around the 1850s, I think, más o menos, beautifully illustrated in a sort of almost kind of boy's own way with beautiful hand-drawn pictures of what this guy was doing with the ash tree. So I looked it up recently. So I'm going to try and get a copy of the book. Had it from the library for a while. So definitely check that one out. There are a few more. The black ash, the Fraxinus nigra that we had a picture of at the beginning, the bark was collected in sheets and used to cover wigwam frames, obviously by the First Nations people. Snowshoe frames, sledges and other items were made by carving and bending the wood, and white ash was used to carve ladles, much like this one, made by the Iroquois people. Basket splints were made by pounding apart the growth rings or layers of soaked ash trunks. And splints were finished for weaving by cutting to size and hand splitting the ash into fine ribbons of wood. And I'll show you a really amazing example in a second. But when researching this, I found a lot of these ladles, Francis, particularly made by the Iroquois, actually have a bird's head on the end of it as a sort of curved. Um, but it's really interesting to see, particularly here in North America, how so many First Nations people actually interacted until very recently with nature to produce many of these amazing items that are now artisan gifts, but 150 years ago were an essential just to cook with, right? So there was no convenience store to nip down and buy yourself a new plastic spatula made on the other side of the world. You had to go down to the forest and carve it yourself. So best not to lose it in the first place, I would suggest. But let's have a look. What else? Look at this. This is exactly what we're talking about. This is a basket woven by the Wabanaki people. So yes, the ash does have other uses, and we can see here. It makes excellent firewood, of course. The high pliability of it makes it ideal in the production of things as varied as early aeroplanes. Apparently, some early aeroplanes were made from ash wood, as well as we've already mentioned baseball bats. And the wood is also valued in the making of instruments for the clear, resonant tone it provides. So I'm assuming it would make a good flute or a whistle. Um, yeah, I think my old friend Nigel Shaw and his partner Carolyn Hillier up on Dartmoor, he makes flutes, and he would often bring different pieces of wood that you could choose whether to make a flute from an ash tree, I think an oak or a yew. He had f four or five different trees, and accordingly the sound is different. Of course, the resonance of the tree. Really beautiful practice making wooden flutes, and some the other direct uses it was used as a dye for clothing and the application of the bark to reduce your smell during a hunt, all of which is very important when you have to hunt for your own dinner. So didn't know those ones either. And yeah, that's it. Anything on the uses, Francis? Anything there that you've come across that I didn't cover or anything you wish to comment on?
No, I think you've covered everything. I mean, I have seen some beautiful furniture made out of ash, chairs and as you say, tables and whatnot.
Yeah.
And there is something very um, wonderful about sitting on or eating at a table that is just this pure, beautiful wood,
Right.
it just the energy is still there. There's a certain
True.
energy that is very, very welcoming somehow.
I couldn't agree
And
more. I
more.
love having wood around the house.
Mm.
I find personally that a lot of modern architecture from the last 40 years to be incredibly soulless and uninspiring. I'd much rather live in a house that has, even though I don't agree with quarrying or chopping down trees per se, it's something that nature kind of provides in some ways, and I definitely prefer wood and stone in that way to just sort of blasé concrete, which invariably degrades really quickly. You can see in countries where they've used cheap materials that most houses have to be rebuilt after 20 to 30 years. And of course, in Britain especially, people can live up in houses up to 1,000 years old or more even. I've
Mm.
certainly lived in houses, several houses that were over 300 years old. And that's not even that
Mm.
old for Britain. So anyway, we digress. When I was looking at the pictures for the Wabanaki baskets, I just chose this one, but there were many other ones that were also super beautiful and impressive. And yeah, I would never have imagined that the ash tree could be made into something that looked like that. I'm actually quite mind blown. I mean, I guess these guys have got the processes down after many probably millennia of doing it, but I couldn't even begin to imagine how you would make that out of an ash tree. That's quite
Yeah,
impressive, I think.
absolutely. Yeah, it is amazing.
Right, it's yeah. So let's have a look at the medicine of the ash. Now, as I put at the outset here, the ash is not really widely known in modern times for the use of its medicine, but that's not to say it doesn't have any. Our redoubtable friend, Mr. Nicholas Culpeper, his herbal lists a few of them. He says that the water distilled from the ash in small quantities helped those who are retaining water. So effectively, as a diuretic, it was also used in this way
Mm.
by the Native Americans. So that's one of the main things that it's known for as being a diuretic. Culpeper also mentions that the leaves decocted in white wine helps break up kidney stones. I'm not sure that the white wine's going to help that much,
Yes,
but
yeah.
anyway, they did things a bit different back in those days.
Mm.
Um, the leaves apparently can also help with jaundice. Um, and juice from the leaves also helped with the swelling of an itching of bug bites. That's something I can definitely do with because the bugs
Wow.
here are absolutely ferocious. The mozzies kicked in this week and they've been taking chunks out of me. And one tribe, the San Fernando Indians, refreshed themselves with water from the bark of ash trees in the region that they lived in. So, some opening gambits. The Chippewa people made a tonic from the inner bark of the ash, and they used a decoction of dried ash root as an ingredient in enemas. I included a picture here of some bark from a particular ash tree on the right-hand side. And the application of the sap from the white ash, the Fraxinus americana, was used by Connecticut Native Americans to treat cancerous growths. Now, this is only one place I came across this in my research. They also had other antiseptic or diuretic medicines were made from the leaves, barks, or seeds. Yes, the seeds are also used quite a bit in First Nations medicine. Do I have? Yeah, there's one more, and then I'll ask you for your feedback, Francis. So the boiled bark can be used as a solution for as a laxative or diuretic by the Iroquois again, as we already mentioned. However, this one I found interesting. The roots can be utilized to treat snake bites. The Iroquois people believed that the ash could repel rattlesnakes, and they would stuff their shoes, boots, and leggings with the leaves of the ash whenever they were walking in the woods. Again, a link to St. Patrick and the snakes, which of course
Ah,
he's very
yes,
famous for banishing the snakes out of
yes.
Ireland. Although many people have said that he didn't really do anything because there weren't any there to begin with. So, if we loop into the world of stellar nations and our ancestors and our DNA, we of course link the snakes very much to our Anunnaki ancestors, and that then takes us actually into the 12 tribes of Israel, the Tuatha De Dan, and the children of Dan, which actually then leads us back to St. Patrick. So everything is always interconnected, everybody. And so even though we're talking about the ash tree and snakes, somehow it's still all part of the bigger picture of the world that we live in and very much of today. Some Native American tribes assigned the ash tree special medicinal value without actually specifying why, while the Seneca people believed it to be an increaser for the propensity of pregnancy. Again, I haven't come across too many sources for that, but the European ash can provide. This bit really got me quite excited after various chats with our brother Pete. Fraxinus excelsior can provide immunomodulatory, not one to say after a few drinks, that activity, potentially helpful in immune-related diseases, as well as reducing pro-inflammatory cytokine production, backing up traditional herbal use for inflammation and pain. So, two key words there that caught my attention: the immunomodulatory aspect. We've often talked about the elder tree being an neuroimmunomodulator, which is a fancy way of saying that it can read your field instantly and work out what you need without you having to do anything. That to me says that this tree is of high magic, indeed. And it also here has the ability to reduce pro-inflammatory cytokine production, which, of course, anyone who can remember anything that happened from 4 or 5 years back in 2020 and 21, will remember that there was a lot of talk about cytokine storms and spike proteins. So we don't
Mm.
need to dig that rabbit hole any more than those two key phrases. I'm sure you all know what I'm referring to. So I find it again interesting that the ash is cropping up in a moment where certainly in the Blessed Isles, they're trying to push another something. If you've watched the news the last couple of days, you'll have seen that the south east of the country is now under some sort of situation. You know what I'm talking about, Francis? The meningitis outbreak.
Ah, yes. Mm.
Yeah. So these days, an outbreak can be one person. If
Yes.
you read the news reports, so always good to not get too excited on these things. But I wonder, Francis, whether there is still some loop back to those offered medications of 21 and 22, because we still, at least in the narratives, we still haven't really seen much of the anticipated effects of that. Although I do personally think a lot has been taken off the table. But not to worry
Mm.
if that's the case, because the ash tree is here to help us. And as a immunomodulatory tree, it should be able to very quickly identify if we have any grommets or situations from those medications from a few years ago. I'm sure most
Mm.
people watching this haven't got that to worry about, or if you did, that you've already taken the necessary precautionary work. But maybe if this is something that's coming into your awareness only at this point and you happen to be watching this video, maybe the ash could help for a variety of reasons. You know what, Francis, what I'm getting from this is most of all that this tree has a lot of very powerful magic, but it doesn't like to grandstand that magic too much. It's not maybe as vociferous about its magic as other trees because it's hinting. I mean, I did some extensive research on this and I know the ash tree pretty well from having lived under one for 6 months. And even the Heaven on Earth course, that was largely inspired by living with the ash tree and her showing how to work more deeply with the four directions as the tree is the basis. But this tree doesn't seemingly have the big long list of medicines that many of the plants that we love in our tribe and have talked about have, and yet somehow hidden amongst the cracks are more esoteric hints at perhaps what it might deal with at a higher level of the non-physical. dealing with rattlesnakes, dealing with
Mm.
cytokine production. The immunomodulatory activity tells me it's probably pretty good at dealing with bioweapons. And of course, we know in our world that pregnancy rates and fertility rates have been absolutely dropping like a stone over the last 20 years to really quite worrying levels. So perhaps the ash tree could help in fertility mechanisms. What's jumping out at you at this point, Francis, about the ash's medicine?
Well, the folklore is very interesting because it was believed that, and you talking about the immunomodulator aspect,
Yeah.
um, that the ash tree um, absorbs illnesses. This was how it was seen that it took illnesses into itself and out of the human. And so it was used a lot with babies who were ill. They'd
Mhm.
make and with the roots, they'd make a little figure to out of the ash roots and put it with the baby, um, and and the baby would get better. Um, and so I was listening to somebody the other day who said that his grandmother, that recently, his grandmother always talked about how if you had a wart, that if you put a, and this sounds a bit painful, but if you put a stick in the wart and then put that stick into the ash tree, the wart would disappear.
I've heard that, you know.
You've had, yeah, it's still in the it's
Yeah,
still in the
yeah.
ether, isn't it?
I hadn't
Yeah.
remembered it until you said it,
Um,
but I've heard that before. Of course, poking the wart and the painfulness might depend where the wart is, so perhaps not.
mm.
You need to be careful with that one. But yeah, I've heard that before that you just by simply giving the, I guess, almost like not just the DNA, but the structure of whatever the infection is in the wart to the tree as an immunomodulator, it just
That's
analyzes
it.
it. I think that
Yeah.
what we can say is that immunomodulatory activity is saying that the tree is able to analyze extensively and in detail almost any information you give it from yourself, right?
Plus, absolutely, yes, and plus strengthen the immune system as well at the same time. If it's for instance, with a baby, if or anybody,
Right.
if it's a weak immune system in some way, then the ash tree can help that. I mean, the magic of it is so, or it seems like magic, but so many like the elder, as you said, are immunomodulators, and absolutely phenomenal because of that.
Right.
Um, and interestingly enough, I mean, this is not really to do, it's another one of those things. It's not really to do with health
Right.
necessarily, but the the ash tree, like you mentioned, oak, ash, and thorn, which often grow together, um, and the ash often there are sort of three trees will often grow together with the ash. So that there's the oak, ash, and um, elder, which brought it to mind because you just mentioned the elder, and the energies, the combined energies of those three trees um, will give you access, enable you to um, uh, get into the energy of the very, very ancient land.
Right.
Um,
Makes
and then
sense.
there's Yes. And then there's oak, ash, and willow, which is really those combined energies are very good for visionary work in the etheric. So it's very, this tree is there seems no end to what it can do and how it can do it. You know, I mean, when I said it takes you far and wide, it goes far and wide. It's so it feels to me like a tree that is so connected with humanity in so many ways, inner, outer, psychically, intuition, everything. It is an astounding tree.
Right. So yeah, I'm just actually looking up in the oak, ash, and the fawn. I'm just trying to remember whether the fawn is considered to be the black fawn or the hawthorn.
I
It's the
think that
hawthorn.
one's about balancing the masculine and feminine, isn't it? The
Yeah,
oak, ash, and
so
thorn.
yeah, so the oak, the ash, and the thorn. Yeah, it's the hawthorn, which of course is the another fairy tree, the May
Yes.
Queen. Yeah, so the hawthorn is very connected to the fairy. So it's interesting. They're all quite different energies. You've got more masculine oak,
Mm.
which is also carrying the imprint of Yggdrasil and the world tree, but it's a more masculine. You've got the ash, which is, I guess, the more original blueprint. That's what the ash told me. It's like, yes, the oak has that blueprint, so does the yew, and so do other trees have the world tree, but I am Yggdrasil. Like, let's be really clear about that. She was a little upset with me because I've been saying that the yew was the Yggdrasil because the yew tree also told me that, but really I now understand that the yew, as an eternal being, holds the blueprint for pretty much anything you can think of, including Yggdrasil. But the ash was very, no, no, this one comes from me. So we can understand that the world tree blueprint is not necessarily to one tree. But what we're going to have a look at in a second with Yggdrasil and how it relates to the Norse very much is, and I've got to be honest, Francis, I never believed it because I always had the idea that ash trees were really spindly because those were the ash trees that grew in my garden were. And then I came across an ash tree that was as big as a yew tree and bigger than most oaks. And I was absolutely blown away at how large it was. I mean, a really old ash tree can be really quite a size, right?
Yeah. I visit one every day. It's huge,
Right.
absolutely huge. And yes, it's guarding the field where I take my dog for a walk so that they don't build on it.
But yeah, to go back to your point, I think that you're right that the oak, the ash, and the hawthorn, for those of us interested in geomancy and being guardians of the grid and doing grid work, you know, having lived under an oak, an ash, and a yew tree, I've been blessed enough to live under all three, all in the toroidal energy field of the tree. It's quite the thing to live in the energy field of a tree for any length of time. 5 years underneath the yew, 6 months under an ash, and now over a year under a big live oak, it changes you. Living in the energy field of a tree absolutely changes you. And you can't say how it changes you or what happened, but you know that you got changed somehow, especially when it's a yew tree. That was pretty intense. So I agree with you. These trees can often appear in the same place. And I take a lot of readings in my geomancy work by observing which trees and plants are in an environmental location because they can often either tell you about the health or the ill health of an area. They can tell you about the state of the grid. If you're in a desert, you can see that there aren't going to be any trees as nodal points because there ain't any trees. And so that will immediately tell you something about that area. And so by understanding how to read the sacred book of nature, you can understand if that part of nature you're in is in a good state or a bad state. And the trees are actually the structure, the framework, we can say maybe even the original Matrix would have been trees. I'd much rather live in a Matrix made of
Mm.
trees, not called the Matrix, but tree tricks. That would be good. The
Yeah.
tree tricks, that's what I'm going to live in. And that's what our ancestors lived in. That's what the Druids lived in. If you can imagine the Druids' world, they lived in plant consciousness
Yes.
100% of the time. The British Isles at that point was literally wooded from the tip of Scotland down to the tip of Cornwall. And they say that a squirrel could run through the branches of an oak all the way from John O'Groats to Land's End.
Yeah.
Now, that's not possible in Britain anymore for lots of reasons. But it makes me think, it used to make me think when I was first doing the plant consciousness events, is like humans these days live in concrete environments that don't have any energetic output. In fact, quite the opposite, they absorb lots of more unhelpful ones. Trees not only have their own consciousness, but actually absorb those unhelpful Wi-Fi rays and all the other things. And of course, trees actually are our environmental managers. They manage oxygen and carbon dioxide. If there are no trees, there ain't no humans. Trees are incredibly important to humans, and we've talked about this before, but maybe trees are the more evolved version of humans. In all of my research, I haven't found anything yet that hasn't dissuaded me from that idea because trees truly seem a lot smarter than humans at the moment. So I don't know. I think maybe we're a little biased here, right, Francis, about how we feel about trees, but
Exactly.
let's get
But it's
into the.
from experience, isn't it?
Well, it
So,
is, yes. It's not like we're on the payroll of the Ash or something, not officially
yeah.
anyway. But we just we just share because these are our experiences. Let's have a little bit of a look at the magic before we round out today's show. So, uh, John Michael Greer, in his Natural Magic Handbook, notes that the ash was associated both as an elf tree and one associated with medieval witchcraft. Unfortunately, words like elves, fairies, and witchcraft are often used in the same sentence and not necessarily correctly so. But it is true that in the world of the ancestors and even medieval Europe, generally one who talked to elves and fairies was normally considered to be a witch, which probably is correct in many ways. That doesn't mean that they were doing black magic on everybody, but we do know from quite a few sources that during the 15th and 16th century and other points in history, there were outbreaks of what we might call witch wars or shaman wars, all of which led to very unfortunate circumstances without going into all of that today. But, again, Francis, when we really go into these old books, we often hear about elf shot and humans being shot by elf darts and all the rest of it. And, many people just mix up elves and fairies completely as if they were the same beings, and they're absolutely not the same beings at all. They look quite different. They're certainly a very different size. And, the fairies are the creational forces of any world, but they come as terraformers to the planet. Again, this is all from the Stellar Nations pathway, but it makes sense. You need fairies to terraform the environment, working with the elementals, working with the big rock beings, the fire beings, all of those things to create an environment. So before they come to that planet, they have to come from the galaxy. And then they come down and do their work. Now, the elves, in my experience, mostly I think are Palladian beings. Whenever I've met an elf, I've seen my own inner elf version is always very tall, very slim, with the long blonde hair and the blue eyes. A typical looking elf. Now, those are the what we call the high elves. Then there are the forest elves. Forest elves look completely different, and you could be mistaken for thinking that they just got a job as a bouncer at your local club. Why? Because they're built like brick shithouses and they're covered in tattoos, and they actually look very much like the Maoris or the Pictish people. Not to be messed with. Why? Because they are guardians of the forest. Does that make them mean and bad? No, they're just tough warrior elves. So I think in the end, Francis, the elves that we know of from all of the fairy stories and even Lord of the Rings, it's a close approximation without being exactly the truth. But what I have learnt is that all fairies have a symbiotic relationship with elves in plural, but also elf in singular, because the
Mm,
fairies realized a long, long time ago that being fairy is amazing, but you're also easy to pick on because you're small and
mm,
manipulate.
mm,
And so they needed guardians, and so they asked for galactic guardians, and the elves came, and so the elves were the guardians of the Fae in the old world, what we now call Anu, the other world, perhaps Lemuria. That's kind of how I understand the other world is very Lemurian yin, watery energy, which of course is very much like Britain and Ireland, very watery and wet. Uh,
mm,
and so I don't know about this, but I just wanted to make that point because I often hear and read many accounts of these words getting mixed up. And again, wisdom, direct experience is perhaps the best way to come to your own truth about these things. Otherwise, you're just believing somebody else's probably a
mm.
hundredth hand account that dates back 500 years. Any thoughts on that first point, Francis, without laboring it as like I just did?
Well, no, it's, this sort of takes it back to this is magic. This is a story that I heard, which um, I don't know how well, I don't know how true it is. I mean, it's goes back to the 1600s. This story, and it's during the witch trials, of course, at that time, and in some village in Sussex, there's where there was um, a woman who I imagine was a wise woman because her mother was her name was Mrs. Mothersole. Um, and anyway, she was accused of being a witch, and the local squire he had a huge ash tree on his property, and I think he may have been the one who accused her of being a witch because he said he had seen her climbing the ash tree, and always on a full moon, and cutting little twigs from it with a very strangely curved knife and talking to herself at the same time. Now,
Clearly a
when
witch,
she
right?
and he tried to catch her, but he didn't manage
Of
it.
course.
Um, but she just went back to the village, and so she was put on trial, and all the local farmers were testifying for her, which clearly she was a wise woman, not a
Yeah,
black witch, which is what he
right.
was trying to make
Yeah.
out. And uh, but the squire also testified, and on the basis of his testimony, she was hanged a week later. And
Hopefully not from
uh,
the ash tree. No.
no, not from the ash tree. No, no. But this this story is something that would have been told in those times to demonize wise women and demonize the ash tree, which I thought was very interesting because clearly people were aware of the power of the ash tree. And what happened was that um, the squire was walking with the local vicar one day in his property, and for some reason their attention was drawn to the ash tree, and uh, they had some kind of conversation about it, and Mrs. Mother's soul, um, and the next day, the squire was found dead in his bed, and there was no sign of what had killed him. Um, he hadn't been attacked. He had clearly thrashed around a lot in the bed, so it looked like he died in pain. Um, but
I
and
think I
he
have a slide
and
about this in a minute. It talks about something to, yeah, but continue, Francis. Yeah.
Well, the rest of the story, it goes on through a couple of generations,
Oh,
always
wow.
demonizing the ash tree. And so it seems so, and it got religious because oh, that's right. The squire, when he had gone to bed that night, he'd picked up, he read the Bible and everything, and he picked up the Bible, opened it at random, and put his finger on a sentence, and it said, "Cut it down." And so it was like there was religion got involved in the story, at which point I pretty much lost interest, seeing that, oh, that's how they spun it, that's how they inverted it. But the thing was, what hit me was that, the ash tree is, it's, as I said before, brings everything to truth and balance.
Mm.
And what that seemed to be telling me was be very careful how you judge people. Because it's you're the one who gets hurt a lot of the time when
Good
as
point.
well as or instead of the person you're judging, because he had no idea what Mrs. Mother's soul was doing in the tree, and he never bothered to ask her, and he didn't talk to the farmers, he didn't do anything, he just testified that she was a witch.
What a
Um,
scumbag.
yeah, absolutely. My thought entirely.
Oops,
Um,
did I say that
but
out
I
loud?
thought
Sorry.
but I just thought that's somehow the truth comes out in stories as well,
Yeah,
and it was like the ash tree was bringing the truth up in if you had the ears to hear it,
right.
and that was what it told me, that this is a warning about judging people, and in this, and I mean, you can judge their actions any way you want, but to assume that you know a person well enough to judge what they're doing, why they're doing it, what their background, the whole thing. You can't know another person like that
That's
to
very
make
true.
any
And
kind of a judgment. And I think that's very pertinent in at the moment,
yes,
everything that's going on.
It
So
really is,
that's
and thank you for raising that point, Francis. Yeah, very important. So, yes, I do feel the tree has a reflective quality at the magic level, and if we think about the Elder Mother, we know that in this time, with the frequency being what it is now, any kind of errant thoughts, words, or even worse, actions, particularly with the use of magic, are going to rebound instantly with some pretty dire consequences on the issuer of that magic. So. Hence why judging, yes, of course, we're all allowed to judge things, but if you judge out loud, you're potentially spreading a misinformation based on your own internal assessment that led you to that judgment with the world in general. And your internal assessment may, on some level, be faulty. So you're spreading faulty assertions potentially about somebody, all of which is lower frequency because you don't need to, and why are you doing that anyway? Why do you want to badmouth somebody? So, yeah, interesting story, and it brings up many things, right? Yes, those pesky squires were always looking for witches in trees and judging them for picking sycamores and whatever else they're up to, talking to themselves. God forbid if I'd been arrested for every time I talked to myself. Uh,
and of course everybody took his word, over the local people who knew her very well,
right, they probably
just
didn't take
because
his
he
word.
was sort of an aristocrat.
Yeah, it's probably that the farmers were tenants on the squire's land and so didn't really have an option whether to speak the truth or not. They had to speak what they knew they were required to speak in order to keep their land, probably.
Well, no, they were all testifying for her.
They did, oh,
He was,
right. And he
yeah,
just ignored them.
yeah,
Well, what can we say about people like that?
yeah. Well, it sort of reflects what's going on today, where sort of there's an official narrative, the authorities have said whatever they want us to believe or whatever.
We
It's
say we don't
exactly
agree with that,
reflecting
and
that
they say we don't
story.
care. Right?
Yeah.
Yeah, you're right. That does sound familiar, doesn't it? Well, let's have a
Yes.
little look. Let's have a little look down the rest of the magic of the ash and see what other little nuggets there are. So, maybe the witch was picking the winged seeds of the ash because it sounds like she
Ah.
could have done with them because it would have protected her against hostile magic, probably coming from the squire in this case. Maybe he got to her before she got the seeds, who knows? In the ancient world, druids carried ash wands. I happened to pull out this particular picture. This is, of course, the bottom end of this wonderful looking Harry Potter-esque ash wand. Also makes staffs, which we'll see in a minute. Greer also notes that ash wood and ash seeds were used for healing and prosperity magic. In the hoodoo tradition that comes out of the Caribbean, a lady called Kat Ronwode notes that the ash is less important in hoodoo, not to be confused with voodoo, they are different, than in European folk magic. However, in this tradition, the ash leaves were used for protection and spells where someone wants to draw love or romance to them or keep it with them. So, always a little unsure about those love potions and spells. They seem a little manipulative and perhaps against maybe someone's free will, but anyway. Leaves were placed in vehicles. I'm assuming in the old days those were horses to help protect against accidents. Also, the leaves were kept on a person to prevent disease. So there is a lucky totem element to the magic of the ash. And what else have we got here? Some traditions of magic hold that the leaf of an ash tree will bring you good fortune. So more of that prosperity stuff. Carry one in your pocket, and those with an even number of leaflets on it are especially lucky. So make sure you've got your odd and even numbers worked out when you pick those leaves, and make sure you get yourself a good one. In some folk magic traditions, the ash leaf could be used to remove skin disorders like the warts that Francis was talking about, such as warts or boils. As an alternative practice, one could wear a needle in their clothing or carry a pin in their pocket for 3 days and then drive the pin into the bark of an ash tree. The skin disorder will appear, as our good sister already told us earlier, and will appear as a knob on the tree and disappear from the person who had it. If we have any first-hand accounts of this being done and working, please do let us know in the comments. And this is my cue to let you know if you made it this far, you will get an emoticon tree. So just let me know you want your prize and also hit like and subscribe to help us with those pesky YouTube algorithms. And of course, we love hearing about people's interactions with any of the trees in this series that we've been talking about. So please do feel free to comment. So, a little bit more about the magic. Newborn babies in the British Isles were sometimes given a spoonful of ash sap before leaving their mother's bed for the first time. It was believed this would prevent disease and infant mortality, again, as Francis has already shared. If you place the ash berries in a cradle, it protects the child from being taken away as a mischievous fairy. I think we already covered that. In northern England, it was believed that if a maiden placed ash leaves under her pillow, she would have prophetic dreams of her future lover. In some Druidic traditions, it is customary to use a branch of ash to make a magical staff. Here we go. So this is an ash staff. The staff becomes, in essence, and this is really true and really important, it becomes a portable version of the world tree, connecting the user to the realms of earth and sky. My wonderful magic teacher, the wonderful David Leasley, he taught me staff magic, and in his words, staff magic is the most powerful type of magic that the universe has. And its potency and precision or specialization depends on the wood that it's made from, of course. So I think having an ash staff to connect you to Yggdrasil, the world tree, which we'll see in a minute, is probably a good idea because it's kind of a constant reminder to stay aligned. And so you don't have any bad thoughts, words, or deeds. Final bit on the magic. Five trees. This is a bit of mythology here. Five trees stood guard over Ireland in the ancient mythology, and three of them were the ash. The ash is often found growing near holy wells and sacred springs. And interestingly, it was also believed that crops that grew in the shadow of an ash tree would be of an inferior quality. That does happen sometimes with trees. They actually make it impossible for other plants to grow underneath their branches for a variety of reasons. In some European folklore, the ash tree is seen as protective, but at the same time malevolent. And anyone who does harm, this is where the squire's obviously got his comeuppance. Anyone who does harm to an ash can find themselves the victim of unpleasant supernatural circumstances. Say no more. I bet the squire wishes he knew that before he cast his judgment far and wide, right? Moving
Yes.
on. So here we go.
Yes.
This is we're heading into the final couple of slides as we round up today's show. So we could do a whole video. In fact, we've done a whole immersion working with Yggdrasil. At the risk of perhaps preaching to the choir on this one, if you are new to the magic of Yggdrasil, it is one of the world trees. This is the map. There are a number that you can pull up. I just like this one because it's more colourful. But the questions I want to put to everybody here, and some of them are sort of rhetorical because we sort of know the answers to some of them, but please, would love to everyone's views. So it's a legendary tree from world tree from Norse mythology, but what is it really and how does it relate to the ash tree? First of all, is it a blueprint for trees, humans, and Mother Earth? Well, if we think of it as the toroidal field, we can see that humans have a toroidal field, trees have a toroidal field, and so does Mother Earth. So this is, I think, a very good way of understanding micro and macro through nature and the fractal nature of our universe, because we can see it. And not only can we see it, when we've done many immersions, right, Francis? I know you did all of these too. We really got
Mm.
to see that inside this human body at the etheric level, lo and behold, is a tree. I kid you not, I have seen the tree inside of me. We can see it different ways. It might depend on a little bit on how we're set up in our etheric DNA. But as a model to understand that this is our Shushumna, our central column, and the energy flows up and down in equal and opposite directions, is our Ida and Pingala. So this very much links to other practices from other parts of the world. We can see here the lower world is filled with ice and giants and dwarves. Yep, you would find all of those in the lower world. The dwarves take care of the natural abundance of the earth through the metals and minerals that are in the earth, until people started digging them up, drilling and stealing them. And the dwarves have not been too happy about that because they've had to allow it to happen when really their job is to protect these things. So we can understand that the lower world gradually, with the advent of the yang world that we live in, his story has become the underworld. And so we've been living essentially the middle world here, the world of the humans, has sort of been almost extensively influenced by the below rather than the above. So we've been living as below as so above. And unfortunately, the below was the underworld. We also here have Elfheim, which is what we would call the other world. We have here Vanaheim, which is the home of the Vanir, and they fight with the Aesir, the gods, Odin and Thor, and all of the other ones who live up here in Asgard. I looked into the war between the Vanir and the Aesir, and the more you get into the stories of Yggdrasil, the more you realize you're mostly just relying on the Icelandic author of the Eddas, Snorri Sturluson, who just writes a few pieces about it. Most of this is actually subject to more recent interpretations. Now, I can say from personal journeys and meditations, I have actually visited most of these places. They're not exactly the same as the Vikings saw them, but I can identify that those were the. I've been to the land of the giants, land of the gnomes, land of the elves, and even to the world of the gods. I don't think I've been to Helheim exactly, but a few places similar, definitely. And so we can understand that this central column is mapping out to us where we can find all these components of ourselves. For we probably still have giant DNA, Nephilim. We certainly have dwarf DNA because we're connected deeply to the earth. So this is kind of like our unseen roots. This would be our IC, actually, in astrology. And our MC would be at the top of the tree, which is where the eagle's perch is. Here he is, the fifth dimension. So this is a model, and this one doesn't have the rainbow bridge, but the rainbow bridge normally comes out and loops up here, the Bifrost Bridge. In the old days, the only way to escape the Matrix was to go to the most deep part of the underworld, find the back door that has Rainbow Bridge written on it, and go through it and go over the Rainbow Bridge, which pops you out here beyond the influences of the third and fourth dimension and thus the Matrix, because here at the top of the tree is the fifth dimension of non-duality. And then above that, of course, is the sixth dimension of unconditional love, the Christed consciousness, and beyond. So is it a blueprint? That was my second question. The toroidal model shows us in nature how we can live in a self-replenishing system. The oak and the ash show us that these enclosed systems, when not hacked, which has been a big part of the ash tree, when they are not hacked and they are working properly, like the human body, it's an everlasting system. It's the hacking into the toroidal field that has made humans sick, mainly because it also happened to Yggdrasil. When we were doing Heaven on Earth, Francis, way back at the beginning of last year, I was channeling directly from Yggdrasil, and what she showed me was the influence, and we're going to come to this in a minute because it's real, the influence of the arthropodic beings, the insects, who had completely taken over the tree. I saw it in the reality with all of the insects living on the tree. But once I understood at the stellar nations level what effect the ants were having, the roaches were having, the beetles were having, and all of the other insects that were running up and down the tree and often into my hair and biting me, I had a sort of first-hand experience that our world tree blueprint is broken. And as a consequence, everything in our world is broken because of that. That we could even say it's the misalignment of the 24 degrees to Polaris rather than to the fairy star of Deneb, which Göbekli Tepe points out. Either way, it's the same story, all of which is coming to a point of culmination literally today, tomorrow, the next few days. Why? Because if we want to ascend, this needs to be fixed. Now, today, I had the intuition in meditation last night. I went deep into meditation with the Ash. She asked me, "Do you feel that you are fixed in your own internal Yggdrasil, Davyd?" I was like, "Yes, I do, actually. For the first time in my life, I feel good inside." And she's like, "Good, I do too. Thanks to all the work that you and your gang and many others have been doing. I'm now free of those pesky arthropods and no longer am I contaminated. My system is fixed and completely whole again, which means that I'm ready now to receive the beautiful signals coming from the universe, perhaps even from the flyby yesterday of Atlas 3I. So, if anyone's been doing work with Yggdrasil and wants to comment on this, please do. But me personally, I'm feeling that our original blueprint, the Yggdrasil blueprint that is designed for this whole planet, is okay. What do you think, sister?
I agree.
Good. Well, that's
Yes, the ash feels very, very healthy to me, and you just described it all beautifully. So
good.
I don't
Yeah.
have anything else to say about that.
Good, thank you. I wasn't quite sure how I was going to explain that bit without taking 5 hours to do so, but it's an incredibly interesting piece. We did a whole 13 days on this, working with the oak, the ash, and the yew tree. We've covered it in every immersion since. The Yggdrasil blueprint was in the Stargate Opens in the descent. For those of you that did that, we descended down our own Yggdrasil, clearing the stargates, the chakras as we went until we got to the fireplace, at the bottom of the tree, our sacred room where the elves and fairies like to hang out because they're our creational forces. And then we went down into the roots. Anyway, it was quite the journey. And if you want to do it, you can still access that on the QPW website. So I think as a final thought on this one, Francis, I just put this as a model perhaps for inner standing ourselves, a map to our inner quantum technology. From my direct experience, that is certainly one of the amazing benefits that I've had from sitting, learning, studying, and being with the wonderful ash tree over the last couple of years.
Yes. Yes, my experience with the ash tree is um uh so every time, because I said that I visit this ash tree every day, um totally drawn to it from the minute I saw it. And for a long time, because we're talking sort of 12, 13 years now, pretty much every day. And there are times when I can be walking by the ash tree, and just insights will happen.
Very
All kinds
chatty.
of yes, yes. Or Canada geese will fly over just as I'm at the ash tree, or another bird will do something that. So, but there
Mm.
are other times when there seems to be absolutely nothing. And I would be asking day after day, so what do you have to tell me today? Do you have anything to say today? And all I'm getting is patience,
Mm.
patience, have patience. And the thing, and what I have realized, because I have been very patient, um, taught to me by the ash tree, clearly, because I don't like being patient, but anyway, um, um, but the thing with the ash tree is that it works so deeply
Yeah,
into human beings, and it works on the subconscious, as well as the conscious, as well as every other aspect, body, mind, spirit, soul.
yeah,
Um, there isn't anything that it can't help you with, can't work with, and
true.
it triggers things in the subconscious. And I realized this. You can only figure this out with hindsight,
Yeah.
because you don't know it's coming. But it's absolutely fascinating, and it's so worth. I wouldn't miss visiting that tree every day.
Yeah, you're absolutely right, Francis. When I moved into the house with the ash tree, at first I thought it was an oak and misidentified it, and then I was intrigued to find that it was an ash tree. And probably from the second or third day I moved into the house, it just started talking immediately when I was sat outside. And there are some plants and trees that are very chatty. The fairies are also incredibly chatty, or at least they are with me. And this tree talked to me pretty much every day. I would sit under it. I mapped out the four directions. I would sit in the east, the south, the west, or the north, depending on which element I wanted to communicate with. And that's always what I got. And so, as a model to have in the garden, having that tree as a quantum
Mm.
compass, it was incredible. And I feel so lucky to have had 6 months of daily teachings from that tree because I would sit and meditate there every day. And when you sit or visit a tree, as Francis has talked about, if not daily, then regularly, you form a relationship.
Mm.
Same as with a human. But if you just visit a tree once and expecting it to reveal all the secrets of the universe, well, then it'd be like saying a random guy, hey, that you just met on the street, hey, dude, like, can you share with me the secrets of the universe? That's assuming the guy might even have the secrets of the universe in the first place, but he's probably going to go, you know what, dude, I'm off to make dinner. I don't have time. So you kind of have to pick and choose. But if you use the modalities that you'd approach a human with a tree, it's kind of similar. Like you want to make friends, you want to develop the relationship, you need to put time into it and not just see it as a resource or something to chop down because it's in your way or whatever other most humans do. So That's kind of a segue into the final couple of slides because it seems important with everything we've talked about. Yggdrasil was under attack from two major direct influences. This one is really bad, and the other one is also not great. Ash dieback is the first one of the things that the ash is being attacked by now. I could do a whole talk on this too, but just quickly for those of you who don't know, the see if I can pronounce this. The Hymenoscyphus fraxinus disease causes a lethal disease of ash and represents a substantial threat both to the UK's forests. In this case, I got this from a UK website, but it's across most of Europe and to amity trees growing in parks and gardens. First detected in the UK in 2012, the disease affects trees of all ages. Young trees can be killed in one season, and older trees tend to succumb after several seasons of infection. Whilst ash dieback is certainly capable of killing trees in its own right, in many cases the weakened tree is colonized by another pathogen, particularly honey fungus, which then accelerates the decline and death of the tree. We can see here the effects of yeah, on the poor tree. It was originally and rapidly spread in continental Europe. It was first confirmed in trees in the UK, growing in nurseries or on recently planted trees. However, many cases have now been confirmed in the wider environment, and in the UK, the disease is now unfortunately widely distributed. It's also established in many other European countries where it's also had devastating effects. The natural host range of the fungus, the honey fungus, includes the European ash, the Excelsior, then also Angustifolia, Fraxinus ornus, the black Fraxinus nigra, the Pennsylvanica, and the Fraxinus americana, and the Manchurica. I'm not sure where that one's from. However, the Americana Manchurica, the least susceptible. So it's pretty bad. The ash dieback. Yeah, there's a little bit more. The symptoms include on leaves, the black blotches appear often at the leaf base and midrib. Affected leaves wilt, just like in this picture. On stems and branches, small lens-shaped lesions or necrotic spots appear on the bark of stems and branches and are large to form perennial cankers. The infection may girdle the stem and kill it in a single season. If the bark is peeled, the wood underneath has a brownish to grey discoloration. This discoloration extends beyond the bark. On the stem bases, you will see that the disease develops dark lesions at the bottom of the tree trunk, known as basal lesions. Sometimes these can appear in the absence of the symptoms on the leaf. And then on the whole tree, affected trees commonly show extensive dieback of shoots, twigs, and branches. And yeah, in general, they don't look great. So that's the first way that the ash has been attacked. Whether it's natural or unnatural, we can only hypothesize, but this little bugger is equally dangerous, particularly here in the Americas. It's taken hold, and most of the ash population in America has been devastated by this. The emerald ash borer, Agrillus planipennis, also known by the abbreviation EAB, is a green buprestid or jewel beetle native to northeastern Asia that feeds on the ash species in general. Females lay eggs in bark crevices on the ash trees, and the larvae feed underneath the bark of the ash trees to emerge as adults in 1 to 2 years. In its native range, this is interesting, it is typically found at low densities and does not cause significant damage to the trees native in the area, which I thought was interesting.
Yeah.
Outside of its native range, it is an invasive species and is highly destructive to ash trees native to Europe and North America. Before it was found in North America, very little was known about this ash borer in its native range. So since coming to America, obviously a lot more research has come about. I mean, it's quite the creature, huh? I've seen these green
Mm.
beetles once or twice. They have a very weird sort of iridescent kind of shine on them. Local governments in North America are attempting to control it by monitoring its spread, diversifying tree species, and of course through the use of insecticides and biological control. If you've ever seen a tree stripped of its bark, you will see all of the marks that these borers do that look like a wiggly worm has been drawing all over it. It's these
Mm.
guys doing that. So here is evidence really of what the ash tree told me. Yes, I'm under attack from arthropods. And this is absolutely one of those, digging and boring into it. And then Here we've got some sort of pathogen bioweapon. It's not really clear. Working with a fungus infection, in this case the honey fungus, to basically kill the tree. So that's how I understood the message when I was putting this together. And today, the tree was asking me, have we resolved all of the energetic attacks that Yggdrasil was receiving, which I perceived to be coming through these two mechanisms? The ash tree, in my money, has had more devastating attacks on it than probably any other tree in the last 20 to 30 years, which, given what we know about the Yggdrasil aspect of it, to me seems pretty significant. It's been attacked in Europe and in America, where it's most widely distributed. And in this case, attacked by something from another part of the world where it doesn't affect the ash tree in its native climate, but when let loose in other environments, absolutely does. So, yeah, anyway, we can mull on that, Francis. But I'm going to round out before we do the final wrap up with these words about Yggdrasil. This is from Daniel McCoy, who wrote the Norse mythology for smart people. He says, in the words of the Old Norse poem, the Voluspa, Yggdrasil is the friend of the clear sky, so tall that its crown is above the clouds. Its heights are snow-capped like the tallest mountains, and the dews that fall in the dales slide off its leaves. The Havamal adds that the tree is windy, surrounded by frequent fierce winds at its heights. No one knows where its roots run, because they stretch all the way down to the underworld, which no one, except shamans, can see before he or she dies. The gods hold their daily council at the tree. So I always like to try and round off
Yeah.
with some pros. We'll bring this down. Final thoughts, Francis, as we round out. We've been a bit longer today, but the ash tree obviously has caught our attention, and she definitely likes to chat, and so do we. So that's probably why this has been a bit longer than we expected. But go on, final words, Francis.
Well, just to say about the attacks on the ash tree, and it's interesting that it's happening in Europe, North America, basically the West.
Yes. Yeah.
That what that tells me is that because we're so closely entwined with trees and their energy and everything, that they're reflecting for us exactly what's been happening to us, the attacks on us of all kinds of bioweapons and et cetera, et cetera.
Right.
Um,
Bioweapons and bugs, arthropods and pathogens.
yes, yes. Um, but we're all stronger than that.
Yes, well, we are.
But
The
I
ash
think it's
tree
just,
is. Yeah.
yes, exactly. And I think I mean, it sounds a bit back to front and upside down, but to me, it's sort of, I hate to think of trees suffering, but it's such a beautiful um, connection between us. It just feels like it confirms the very close, which goes beyond relationship, I think, because our energies just mingle. Human energies, tree energies, they just mingle, and of course, we breathe each other as well. So that's just sort of the lovely note, that the last thing I'd like to say about them.
Beautiful. I mean, I think I pretty much said all of it, and what I didn't say, I think you've said, and I agree 100% that the ash perhaps is showing us the perils of being in the West at this moment, what we've had to deal with pathogens and interfering off-planet beings, whether they're arthropods, beetles, or whatever there might be. And it's the war to end all wars, the organic versus the inorganic. We
Yeah.
perhaps as fairy beings here on planet Earth don't like our home being destroyed by beings from another planet, perhaps who don't really care about it. And we can understand that that existential differing of opinions is the totality of duality, which I feel we all
Mm.
need to let go of on both the extreme left and the extreme right, which, as we were talking about before we hit record, is not quite even what we had thought it was before a few weeks ago, but does make a lot more sense. Perhaps I'll do a video about that too if I can find time at the moment. But I think that what I want to
Yeah.
sign off with is with a prayer to the tree that we are so deeply appreciative for the model and blueprint that she has shown us, certainly in our tribe, but we have tried to share with all of you out there. And of course, she showed to our ancestors and she showed us where we were contaminated, infected, and in doing so, by showing us where we were, we could clean ourselves and heal ourselves, but also in doing so, heal her. And I feel after my meditation last night, she was like, the reason I needed you to wait until the last moment is because today I wish to confirm that both you and me, the tree, are in good shape and we're ready to go for whatever comes next, which I think is coming on equinox. So, final
Mm.
thought to everybody, if you don't have an ash essence, get yourself out there and make one from the tree. We have one from the tree that inspired Heaven on Earth. If you haven't done Heaven on Earth and feel like it could be for you, then check out the 33% Equinox Triscale sale that we have, 33% off all courses until the 20th of March on the QPW website, including the very big and bold journey that we are doing in the Sacred Book of Nature. The discount there is definitely worth it. So do check that out. And of course, on the 18th, live Quantum Plant Alchemy call at 11 o'clock. And for those of you that have signed up, either through the Sacred Book or individually to the transmissions themselves, I will be presenting tomorrow at midday on the fairy gateway plants of the primroses and the cowslips, the primulas. So, Francis, I think the final thought is that it's fairies all the way, right?
Yes, yes. Time has come.
The time
Yes.
has come indeed. So, on that bombshell, thank you so much, lovely skywalking sister. Thank you to all of you
Okay.
for giving us your time. If you've made it this far to the end, hopefully you enjoyed listening to us sharing what we know about the ash as much as we enjoyed sharing it. And we will see you all again in a few weeks for the next tree in the series, which is going to be the mysterious alder tree. So, until then, keep on keeping on. And in Lakesh, I am another tree like you, and we'll see you
Yeah.
all again soon. Bye for now.
Bye.